In this tutorial, I'll explain some of the basics of making an American-style puzzle like this one. So it's a fairly open grid with a relatively small number of black squares, lots of interlocking words, and set across and down clues. This is the final print preview of the sort of thing you could export at the end for solving. So to make this kind of puzzle, you can use the Crossword Compiler main window to edit the grid, and you can use the Review Edit Clues panel to view and edit the clues. So this panel is optional. You can close it if you want to. If you want to open it again, you can go to this button here on the toolbar and click Review Edit Close, and that will open. You can leave that open whilst you're editing the grid, and this will update as you go along. Okay, let's start by making a new grid. So when you open the program, the first thing you'll see is this Create New Puzzle window. So to make an American style puzzle, you just click on the American button. The first thing you have to do is choose the size of the grid that you want to make. So these puzzles typically are size 15 by 15 for most newspapers, or for larger weekend puzzles 21 by 21. But you can choose other sizes or use a custom size if you want to. This box here, Grid Library Sizes, shows you which size grids actually have grid patterns available. So pre-designed grid patterns are available for a set of common sizes, and this shows you those available sizes if you want to use those. So let's go and make a 15 by 15 standard sized puzzle. So click that button. Then you see the grid selection window. This allows you to choose from a set of predefined grids that are available. So you don't have to use these grids. You can design your own grid patterns. If you want to, though, this is a way to get started quickly, and you can click on this list on the left and see lots of different grid patterns on the right. So here, the patterns are named by the number of words in the grid and the number of blocks, a block meaning these black squares. If you have the ProGrid filler, there's also an American by word length grid library you can select down here, and this names them by the distribution of word length, so you can see whether you've got 15-letter words, you've got 3 15-letter words, or whatever. So let's go back to the standard grid library and choose a pattern that we like. One other thing you can do is use the Fit Theme Words button. This is a feature only of the Pro Grid Filler. That will select a grid for you based on the theme words you want to fit. But for the moment, I'm just going to make a standard puzzle with one of the standard grid patterns. Now select Use Selected Grid Pattern. If I want to design the grid myself, I could just click that button and I would start from scratch and do things completely manually. So now I've got my grid, and the next thing to do is put in some words. So the next step in this wizard just gives you a number of steps, depending on how much control you want to take over the process. So putting the words with myself will just allow you to type words into the grid, edit it, invoke other functions manually yourself. Or you can autofill, which fills the grid automatically from a provided word list. Fill grid does the same thing, but allows you to change some of the settings first, like which word list you're going to use, the minimum word score, and so on. So if I do autofill with default options, then that just fills the entire grid automatically from the provided word list. So the fill is going to be random to some extent. It depends on random numbers, and every time you generate it, you'll get a different fill unless it's a very constrained grid. If you don't like the grid that's produced, you can click Next. So what Next will do is it will just make a change to the last part of the grid. This is usually a small fraction of the grid that's changing. So if you really don't like the grid, you want a new fill, the thing to do is actually refill it from the beginning. So I'll just start with a new random word in the first word slot, and you'll get a completely different fill. And that's a good way to just quickly generate different fills and see them. You can see at the bottom here it says fill number 11. I can use this left arrow to see previous fill and go backwards and forwards until I've decided which one I like. You can use this menu button here to see which words are used. So this will just list the words that are in the grid. The word score gives you some indication from the word list of how good the word is in terms of the grid. It gives you the length. And of course, if there's a word here you don't like, you could just refill from the beginning, and it will probably avoid it, and you'll get a new random fill. You can also use check for similar words if you want to check whether there are things that are a bit too close to each other. This will tell you which words have duplicated letters. So here we've got orisons and bison with 4 letters the same. So there's nothing too bad here. If I quite like the beginning of this list, but not some of the end parts of the list, so if I wanted to not have GSA, I could click on 58 and do refill from selected words. That would keep all these ones up here and just refill the last section of the grid. Of course, it may have to redo some of the earlier parts of the grid if it's impossible to change just that word. So once you're happy with the grid, you can just click Accept, and then you're ready to write clues. So if I go to Clue, Review, Edit Clues, you get the list of the words to write the clues for. So here you can type away and directly type in each of these clues in turn if you want to do it by hand. You can also click anywhere in the grid and click on the clue editor, and that will bring up this window, which gives you slightly more detailed control over editing each clue. For example, here I can add an explanation or a citation to explain the reference. So walls, is that a word? Well, let's look in the Word Web Dictionary. So this icon here on the right on the toolbar shows the Word Web Pro optional add-on dictionary if you have that. Oh, and it is a word, wall, high-pitched whiny noises. You could also look at the other references that you have installed. These are optional add-on dictionaries. You can see that Chambers and SOED, which is the shorter Oxford English Dictionary, are highlighted, indicating that the word is also in those. This would be the Collins Dictionary add-on. Or you can check in the online Wikipedia and Wiktionary or WordWeb Online. If you have a clue database already, you can insert clues from the clue database. So this word is not in the database. But if I go on to a slightly more common word like when, you can see that here the provided American clue database does have some example clues for that word. So if I wanted to use a question of timing, I can just select that and click Use Clue, and then it will insert the clue. So I can press these arrows to just navigate one by one if I want to go through the grid, looking at what's available in the clue database, inserting them, typing words in by hand, and I can flip to down and across if I want to here. You can also insert words from a clue database. So if I go to the clue menu and select Use Clues from Database, American is a relatively small sample clue database provided with the program. So if I select that database, it will just look through all the words in the grid and see which clues are available. And here we've got 57 clues available and 19 words without clues. And you click OK, and we see we now have a whole set of clues already written from the database. So you can use a database to reuse clues, or you can use it to store clues you've used before in order not to accidentally reuse them, or various things in between. So I'm not going to go into the details of clue databases here. This is just a quick introductory tutorial. The other things you can do in the Review Edit Clues window, you can spell check the clues by clicking this check arrow here to check that you haven't accidentally made any typos. And if you want to highlight things, you can use bold, italic, and underline, and you can also use those in the clue editor as well. If you want to get to the clue editor from this window, you can just double click on here. If the solution word is not formatted correctly, if you wanted it to be capital and it wasn't, so for example, here, if this was lowercase, I could change it to uppercase correctly by selecting capitalize from right click on here. You can use clue properties to customize various things about how the clues will appear. So you can either find this here under clue properties, or you can click this button on the toolbar in the Review Edit Clues window. So there are various conventions for how clues are defined or displayed. For example, do you have a period after each number or not? So here we've got a period after each number, and they're bold, but they're not right aligned. If I change that, I can click Apply, and the setting will change, and we now no longer have periods after the numbers. Likewise, you can change the headings here. If you want to translate it to a different language, you can change these, or you can change how they're displayed and the fonts. You can change the spacings. You probably don't need to change language specifics normally. For printout, you can change various options about the spacing of the answers and the separation of things when you print out clues with answers, for example, if you're submitting to a newspaper and they have particular requirements. Once you've done with the puzzle and you want to print it out, you can go to File, Print, or Print Export Worksheet. So Print Export Worksheet will produce one page with everything on it for someone who wants to solve it. So if I click Print Preview here, this will give you a screen like I showed at the beginning. So you can print that, or you can use Export to PDF to make a PDF file for a website or email, or you can also use MS Word. If you go to File, Print, you can also make printouts or PDFs more suitable for reviewing and editing or submitting to a newspaper. For example, here I can add headers. I can choose whether to have the puzzle and the solution, or the numbered solution, or various combinations, and I can also print clues with answers. So, for example, if I preview this gives me the grid and then the list of the clues with the answers. So this might be useful for reviewing what you've got. If you wanted to go and check things on a pen and paper later, you can look at the answers as you go along. The numbered solution includes the solution grid, but with numbers in the grid. If it's unchecked, then there aren't any numbers in the solution grid. If you click Print on Separate Page, you'll get a separate page for the solution. So if I preview this now, you'll see that I have a separate page at the end with the solution grid in it. For directly publishing, you can go to File, Export, and then use the Export window. And there are lots of options here depending on what you want to export to. For rich text, is quite good for including all the different things at once, just as I've printed them. If you want to export just the image for a website or something, you might want to use a picture. There are lots of different formats, or you can export a PDF of just the grid or the solution. And there are also various formats for other programs, portable formats describing the whole thing about the puzzle, or just simple plain text if you want to do some external manipulations. So that was an example of making a puzzle entirely automatically. What about if you want to make a little bit more manual control over it? So there are several levels of doing that. Let's start again with an American puzzle that's 15 by 15. So if I go to design the grid myself, I could do everything entirely manually. So I'm left with a completely empty grid. So I can insert black squares by double-clicking with the mouse. Clicking on a square and pressing space will also insert a black square. The numbers then update automatically. So you can go in and click, and you'll notice that when I click here and here, it's producing ones in the symmetric position over here. So that's determined by the symmetry on the grid menu. So here I've got normal symmetry, which has this like S-like symmetry. You could also have dual symmetry, which then puts in 3 other ones. So you get this sort of dual symmetric pattern. If you want to go back to the beginning and delete everything, I can choose to delete all my blocks and start again. So let's put in something perhaps a bit sensible. If I want to see which words will fit in a particular slot, I can put the cursor in the slot and right-click, and that will bring up AutoFind. Or I can use this search icon, AutoFind icon on the toolbar. So that will bring up a list of words for that word slot. and then you can move down to see what it looks like in the grid. If you want to change the direction in which you're going in, so there's two directions in this square, there's up and down, you can use this left-right button here, which changes the directions. That's up, down, and that's left and right. You can also just press Tab. So if I right-click here, that will give me the words along here. What you can also do in this window is check whether the intersections are possible as well. So if I click this bottom button here on the left, that will filter this list so that you only have words which also have possible words in all these intersecting directions. So if I click that, I will get a shorter list of words, and it's selected some word here that it thinks makes it particularly easy to fill the grid for you. The tabs at the top here show various other word lists that I have installed. So the default and basic English are always installed and available. Compounds and phrases is one of the additional larger word lists, as is advanced, and then word web, chambers, and NOAD, which is in the Oxford American Dictionary, are word lists that come with some of the add-on dictionaries that are available if you want to use them. So when you've got a word, you can just click Insert, and that then goes into the grid. You can also just type directly into the grid wherever you want to. So I wanted hope, and here I can click on it and type H-O-P-E, and it'll just appear, in the grid. If you want to undo, you can just do undo. Now, if I keep designing the grid, I might do something like that, which produces a square here which does not have any intersections. And in some publications, that would be quite frowned upon. So you can go to Grid, Style Checking, and select American, 2 letters, and Unchecked. And if you do that, it will automatically highlight any problems that you have. So this style checking allows you to match for various different conventions. And American here will check 2-letter words and having unchecked squares. Unchecked squares means there's no crossing words. So this is not allowed in a typical American newspaper puzzle. So I better get rid of that square, and that will put it back. And I'll have these nasty highlights if I accidentally put in a 2-letter word as well. Here I've now got these warnings. I've got 2-letter words. If you want to delete something, so if I had tags here and I want to delete it, I can just put the cursor on it and press the delete key and delete them one by one, or put them back in. If I wanted to delete stablemate all in one go, I can use Shift plus delete. That will delete all the letters that do not already have words in other directions. So if I press Shift delete here, that doesn't delete the S because that's part of the tags word, but it was part of that word, so it just deleted the whole of that word, and I can try something else in there. You can also use autofill at any time. So if I just want to seed the grid with a couple of words and click autofill, that will then try to fill the grid. And here it says it couldn't find a fill. So that's probably because I've made an impossible combination of letters here, or the grid is far too open. So you can see here it's far too open. I've got 3 parallel 15-letter words here. So there are tricks you can use for isolating sections of the grid. See the video on using bars for doing that. Or you can continue and fill in the grid until it's actually got a sensible number of black squares in it, and it's going to be realistically possible to fill it. So you can use autofill as a quick guide to whether or not the grid is fillable, even if you really want to take more control over it. Now it's absolutely fine, and you can fill the grid. If you want more control over filling, you can go to Words, Fill Grid, and that allows you to choose different word lists, change options for the score. There's a separate video about scoring, which explains how the ranking of the words that are chosen works and how to adjust the scores. You can also use a themed fill to try and use a particular theme words more often. And if you have the Pro Grid Filler add-on, you can also use manual word selection. So if I select manual word selection, that gives me this window where I can choose words to go in each slot one by one. And here it doesn't just check for intersections like in AutoFind, it actually does a complete check. So here you can see that if I put in severeness along here, I'm then forced to put in these words across here, Tempe and Arian, and the list of forced words is at the bottom here. So this allows me quite a lot more control over the fill, and I can do bit by bit. If I now click severeness, that will put that in and move on to the next word. And you see it's automatically inserted those words that were forced there. So you can go through the grid like this, filling it in step by step. Or you can click stop and then continue doing things in a more manual way if you want to by using AutoFind or typing things in manually. You can check the grid statistics by using File, Statistics. That will open up the possibility of looking at all sorts of summary statistics of the grid, including the number of words, the number of squares. If I change the grid somehow, if I change the number of blocks here, you'll see the numbers all updating in this window as I edit it. This also lets you view the words that you've got. So most of them are not there, of course, at the moment. But the ones I have got are completed here, and the word length distribution is on the right, and you can click these if you want to see where they are. If I click similar words, that will show me words that are similar with overlapping letters. Accidental words will check against words in a blacklist. So fortunately we haven't got any of those here, so that's not a problem, and the letters tab will show you the distribution of letters that you've got so far in the grid. So sometimes it's useful to keep this page open if you want to keep close track on what's going on in the grid and the characteristics of it. Or you can keep it closed and just work directly on the grid until you're happy with it. You might want to save the puzzle before you get too far in case you have a computer problem, so you can click File, Save As to save somewhere, exactly the same as you would with a file in any other program. You can save the puzzles in your documents and then open them again later. If you want to view what the puzzle would look like, you can click on this icon on the toolbar, and that just shows you the puzzle as it would be seen by someone solving it, or the solution as would appear when you printed the solution. If you want to change where things appear or format words, you can select them and use square properties. And there are lots of options here for formatting the color, changing letters, changing numbers, doing customized and more advanced things. And there are additional videos on more advanced topics about how to achieve various different special effects and colors and things. You can use grid properties to customize some of the properties of the overall squares. If you wanted all the black squares to, instead of being black, to be green, you could change that to green. You can change the default sizes in millimeters used for the export or the zoom. And you can change the relative sizes of the letters and the numbers, the grid lines, and so on. So I click Apply. I've now got green blocks everywhere. You can write clues as you go along, or you might want to wait until the end. If you're going to end up changing words here, of course, it's probably better to wait until the end and you finish the grid. You don't want to waste time writing clues that you're not going to end up using because you're going to change the word before you've finished. You can write the clues any time by clicking on the clue editor if you want to. You can click the word web icon if you want to try and insert a clue from the dictionary WordWeb Pro instead of from the clue database if it's not in the clue database. So I wanted to use a lady friend. I do copy, and that will just insert into there. When you have a finished puzzle, you can also change things like the title, copyright information, and headers for printing out. To do that, go to the File menu. Information is information about the puzzle, like the title and so on. So here, this is the example puzzle provided with Crossword Compiler, which has the title 3 Demos in 1. If you're starting a new puzzle, these would normally be empty, and you can type in your title, the author, description of the puzzle, or any particular instructions you have about solving the puzzle. You can also add metadata for processing binary files for more advanced handling and tracking. The headers option determines what appears when you print out or export a PDF. So here you can change text in the top left or the top right. You could put your name and address or other details. This placeholder here is the placeholder for the title. So you don't need to change the headers every time you make a new puzzle. This is automatically substituted for the title. But if you wanted to add your copyright or something here, which is exactly the same for every puzzle, then you could save that in the header and reuse it. And there's all the standard options for formatting with bold and so on. So that's about it for this introductory tutorial. There are many other follow-on videos that you can watch for more details about various different aspects of the process, or making various more sophisticated puzzles, or taking more control over the filling, the words, the clue databases, and so on.